June Mercer stood in the cramped lawyer's office with 43 minutes left before her inheritance vanished forever, and the single solution standing across from her looked more like a mistake than a miracle. The man's name was Levi Granger, and until 6 minutes ago, June had never heard it. The lawyer, a wheezing man named Caldwell, had summoned Levi from the street with the desperate air of someone throwing dice with other people's futures. Caldwell's wire-rimmed spectacles caught the failing light as he shuffled papers and explained the situation for the third time, as though repetition would make it less insane. June's late aunt had left her Juniper Ranch, 300 acres northeast of Eagle Creek, on the iron condition that June arrived married or wed within 24 hours of reading the will. The will had been read yesterday. June had spent 18 hours searching for a solution that did not involve shackling herself to a stranger. She had found none. Caldwell had found Levi. Levi's voice was low and western rough when he finally spoke. "I need to leave Eagle Creek today. A wife makes that easier." "What do you need the ranch for?" June kept her expression smooth even as her pulse kicked. She had practiced this lie for hours. "I am a school teacher. I need stable employment and a place independent of my family. The ranch provides both." Levi's gaze did not waver. "You are lying, but I do not care why. I need a marriage certificate I can show if someone asks questions. You need a husband on paper before sunset. We make this bargain, we go to the ranch, we stay out of each other's way. When it is safe, I leave, and you keep the land. Do you agree?" June's hands wanted to shake, but she locked them at her sides. She had stolen the teaching certificates from the county office 2 weeks ago. Certificates that proved her former employer had lied about her conduct and her dismissal. Those papers were hidden in her trunk. If anyone discovered the theft before she secured the ranch and disappeared into quiet rural life, she would face criminal charges. A husband, even a stranger, provided a shield of respectability that a single woman accused of theft could never claim. She met Levi's eyes and saw no warmth, but also no cruelty, only the hard pragmatism of someone who had run out of better options. "I agree." Caldwell exhaled in relief and shoved a marriage register across the desk. "Sign here, both of you. I will fetch the judge. He owes me a favor, and he is 3 doors down. You have 38 minutes. June signed her name in careful script. Levi signed beside her, his handwriting blunt and level. Caldwell scurried out. The door banged shut. Silence filled the small room like rising water. Levi leaned against the wall and studied her with the stillness of a man used to waiting. "Why is your family not here?" "They do not approve of my choices." June kept her tone light, a skill she had learned young when her father's disapproval became a daily weather system she had to navigate. "This inheritance is my chance to live on my own terms." Levi nodded slowly. "I understand that." June seized the opening. "Why do you need to leave Eagle Creek?" His jaw tightened. "There is a warrant. It is false, but that will not matter to the man carrying it. A wife gives me a reason to be traveling, and a second name on paperwork if anyone looks twice. After a week or two, the situation will resolve, and I will move on." June felt a chill that had nothing to do with the draft seeping through the walls. "What is the charge?" Levi's gaze went flat. "Cattle theft. I did not take anything, but the man who did made sure the blame landed on me. I am not going to jail for his crime." She should have walked out. A wanted man was a risk she could not afford. But June had stolen papers folded into the false bottom of her trunk, and no moral high ground to stand on. More than that, she had 13 minutes left and no other options. If Levi ran, she could claim ignorance. If he stayed, and the warrant proved true, she would be no worse off than she was now. If he left as promised, she would have her ranch and her solitude, and a legal shield no one could question. The door swung open. Caldwell returned with a tired-eyed judge who smelled faintly of whiskey and wood smoke. The judge glanced at the register, at June, at Levi, and sighed. "You understand this is legally binding?" "Yes," June said. Levi nodded. The judge pulled a small battered prayer book from his coat and rattled through the vows in a flat monotone. June repeated the words. Levi repeated them. The judge pronounced them married, signed the register, and left without ceremony. Caldwell handed June a folded certificate and a brass key. The ranch house is 15 miles northeast on the Eagle Creek Road. There is a caretaker, but he left last month. You will need supplies. June took the key and slipped it into her coat pocket. Her trunk was already loaded on the hired wagon outside. She had planned to leave alone. Now she turned to the man who was legally her husband and felt the strangeness of it settle over her like a weight. "We should go before dark." Levi pushed off the wall. "I have a horse. I will follow your wagon." They left Caldwell's office and stepped into the cold edge of a November afternoon. Eagle Creek's main street stretched in both directions, a mix of false front buildings and rutted mud. June's hired wagon stood near the saloon, her trunk roped in the back. Levi's horse, a rangy bay gelding, was tied to the post outside the general store. June climbed onto the wagon bench and took up the reins. The hired driver had abandoned her an hour ago, when she could not pay him extra for the ranch run. She had driven farm wagons as a girl. She could manage this. Levi swung into his saddle and walked the bay alongside her wagon. His eyes scanned the street with the alertness of someone expecting trouble. June flicked the reins and the wagon lurched into motion. They rolled out of Eagle Creek as the sun dipped toward the hills and the wind turned sharp. The road climbed into rolling country dotted with juniper and scrub oak. June kept the horses at a steady pace, her hands cold even inside her gloves. Levi rode without speaking, his attention shifting between the road ahead and the empty land behind them. After an hour, the silence became less uncomfortable than companionable. The shared quiet of two people, with no need to fill the air. The first scattered drops of rain hit June's face, just as the ranch buildings appeared in the distance. Juniper Ranch sat in a shallow valley, a low wooden house with a covered porch, a barn, a stock pen, and a windmill that creaked in the rising wind. The place looked weathered, but solid. June felt something loosen in her chest. This was hers. No one could take it. No one could tell her to leave. She guided the wagon up to the house and set the brake. Levi dismounted and tied his horse to the porch rail. June climbed down, her legs stiff, and pulled the brass key from her pocket. The front door was warped and stubborn. She shoved it open and stepped inside. The interior was dim and cold. A front room with a stone fireplace, a rough table, 2 chairs, a doorway leading to a back bedroom, a kitchen lean-to on the side with a cast-iron stove. Dust covered every surface, but the structure was sound. June set her bag on the table and turned to find Levi standing in the doorway, hat in hand. rain beginning to darken his shoulders. "I will stable the horse and bring in your trunk," he said. "Thank you." He hesitated. "There is a storm coming. It will be here by full dark. I will check the barn and see what supplies are left." June nodded. "I will start a fire." Levi left. June found a stack of dry wood beside the fireplace and kindling in a tin box. Her hands shook slightly as she built the fire, not from cold, but from the sheer weight of the day catching up with her. She struck a match. The kindling caught. Flames spread, and the room began to warm. Levi returned with her trunk and set it beside the bedroom door. Rain drummed on the roof now, steady and cold. He shrugged out of his wet coat and hung it on a peg. June watched him move through the space with the ease of someone used to making do. He checked the windows, tested the door latch, scanned the room with the same careful assessment he had given the road. "There is grain in the barn, and the well is good," he said. "The stock pen is empty, but the fences are intact. If you want cattle, you will need to buy them in the spring." June stood and brushed dust from her skirt. "I do not know yet what I will do with the land. Right now, I need it to be mine. That is enough." Levi's expression softened a fraction, the first hint of understanding she had seen. "That makes sense." The storm intensified. Wind howled around the eaves. Rain turned to sleet, rattling against the windows like flung gravel. June found a tin of coffee and a battered pot in the kitchen. She boiled water on the now hot stove and poured 2 cups. Levi accepted his without comment, and they sat at the table in the firelight, strangers bound by a piece of paper and a shared need to disappear. June sipped her coffee and studied him across the flickering light. "You said the warrant is false. What happened?" Levi set his cup down carefully. "I worked for a man named Hackett. He runs cattle south of here. Last month, 30 head went missing. Hackett accused me and 2 others. The other men had family and ties. I did not. Hackett pushed the sheriff, and the sheriff issued the warrant. I left before they could arrest me. Did you try to prove your innocence?" Levi's smile was bitter. A drifter's word against a cattleman with money and influence. There was no proving anything. "I took my horse and rode north. I planned to cross into Colorado, but then Caldwell found me and offered this arrangement. A marriage certificate, and a quiet place to wait while the real thief shows his hand. Hackett will find his cattle, or the thief will sell them and get caught. Either way, the warrant dies. I give it 2 weeks." June traced the rim of her cup. "What if it takes longer?" "Then I leave anyway. You will be safer if I am not here when trouble comes." She wanted to argue, but he was right. The thought of a lawman arriving and finding her alone was less frightening than the thought of one arriving and finding her harboring a wanted man. Still, something in Levi's steady presence made her feel less exposed than she had in months. "Why did you agree to this?" she asked. "You could have ridden on without the marriage." Levi met her eyes. A married man traveling with his wife raises no questions. A single man on a fast horse with no clear destination draws every lawman's attention. "You gave me cover. I am grateful." June felt the weight of her own secrets press against her ribs. She had told him nothing true except her need for the ranch. The stolen papers in her trunk could destroy the fragile safety she had built in the last 8 hours. But Levi had not pressed her for details, and she would not press him. They were both running. That was enough common ground for now. The wind howled and the fire popped. June finished her coffee and stood. "I am taking the bedroom. You can sleep out here by the fire." Levi nodded. "That is fair." June carried her trunk into the small back room and shut the door. She lit a stub of candle and opened the trunk. Her few dresses, her good boots, her mother's locket. And beneath the false bottom, the 3 teaching certificates she had stolen from the county office in Silver Bend. The certificates proved that her dismissal had been based on lies, that the school board member who had forced her out had falsified records to cover his own misconduct. She had taken the papers because they were the only proof she had. But theft was theft. If anyone traced the missing documents to her, no amount of truth would save her from jail. She closed the trunk and blew out the candle. The bed was narrow and the mattress lumpy, but it was hers. She lay in the dark and listened to the storm and the faint crackle of the fire in the next room. She had a husband she did not know, and a crime she could not undo, and a ranch that might be her salvation or her trap. Sleep came slowly. She woke to pale gray light and the smell of coffee. She dressed quickly and stepped into the front room. Levi had the fire built up and a pot on the stove. He glanced at her and nodded. "Morning." "Morning," June said. The storm had passed, but the air was bitter cold. Frost glazed the windows. "I checked the barn," Levi said. "The roof held, and the horse is fine. There is enough hay for a week if we are careful." June poured herself coffee and sat at the table. The reality of their situation settled over her like a second skin. They were 15 miles from town, alone on a ranch with no neighbors in sight, legally bound but functionally strangers. It should have felt more dangerous than it did. They spent the morning making the place livable. June swept the floors and washed the windows. Levi repaired a broken shutter and cleared the chimney. They worked in parallel, speaking little. But the silence was no longer uncomfortable. By midday, the house felt less like an abandoned shell and more like a place where people could survive a winter. June was hanging a pot to dry when she heard hoofbeats. She froze. Levi heard them too. He moved to the window and looked out, his body going still in a way that made June's pulse spike. "2 riders," he said quietly. "Coming fast." June crossed to the window and looked past his shoulder. 2 men on horseback, one wearing a long coat and a wide hat, the other younger and lanky. They were a quarter-mile out and closing. "Do you recognize them?" June asked. "No," Levy said. "But that does not mean they are not looking for me." June's mind raced. If they were lawmen, showing fear would look like guilt. If they were neighbors, hostility would raise questions. She took a breath and straightened. "We are a married couple living on our ranch. That is all they need to know." Levi glanced at her, and something like respect flickered in his eyes. "All right." They stepped out onto the porch together. The riders pulled up in the yard, horses blowing steam. The older man dismounted. He was broad-shouldered and weathered, with a badge pinned to his coat. The younger man stayed in the saddle, watching them with bright, curious eyes. The older man tipped his hat to June. "Ma'am." "I am Deputy Harlan from Eagle Creek. This is my associate Tom. We are looking for a man named Levi Granger. There is a warrant out of Hackett's Range. Cattle theft. We heard he passed through town yesterday." June felt Levi go tense beside her, but his expression did not change. She stepped forward, letting her body language read as protective rather than frightened. Deputy. I am June Mercer. This is my husband, Levi Granger. We were married yesterday in Eagle Creek and came directly here to Juniper Ranch. This is my inheritance, and Levi is helping me manage it. Harlan's eyes flicked between them. Your husband? Yes, June said. We have the certificate if you need to see it. Harlan studied Levi with the slow assessment of a man used to reading guilt. You came from Hackett's range. I worked for Hackett, Levi said evenly. I left because the work was finished. I met June in Eagle Creek, and we married. I have broken no law. Harlan's gaze sharpened. Hackett says 30 head of cattle went missing, and you were one of 3 men who had access. The other 2 have alibis. You do not. I left because I was not going to take the blame for someone else's crime, Levi said. If Hackett finds his cattle or catches the real thief, the warrant will drop. Until then, I am a married man living on my wife's land. Unless you have proof I took those cattle, there is nothing more to discuss. Harlan frowned. I will need to see that marriage certificate. June went inside and retrieved the folded paper from her bag. She returned and handed it to Harlan. He unfolded it, read it slowly, and handed it back. This does not prove innocence. No, June said. But it proves he is my husband, and this is our home. If you want to arrest him, you will need more than a rancher's word and a convenient accusation. Harlan's expression hardened. You are making this more complicated than it needs to be, ma'am. I am protecting my husband, June said. If that is complicated, I apologize for the inconvenience. Harlan stared at her for a long moment. Then, he looked at Levi. I will wire Hackett and tell him I found you. If he pushes for an arrest, I will be back. If the cattle turn up, or someone else confesses, this ends. Either way, do not leave the county. Levi nodded. Understood. Harlan swung back into his saddle. He and Tom rode out without another word. June watched them disappear over the rise before she allowed herself to breathe. Levi exhaled slowly. Thank you. June turned to him. I meant what I said. If they come back, I will not let them take you without proof. Why? Levi asked. You do not know me. June met his eyes. Because I know what it is like to be accused of something and have no one believe you. Something shifted in Levi's face, a softening she had not seen before. He nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement that felt more significant than words. They went inside. The house felt smaller now, the walls closer. June poured herself water and drank it in silence. Her hands were steady, but her mind was spinning. Harlan would wire Hackett. Hackett would either push for an arrest or let it go. If he pushed, Levi would run. If he ran, June would be alone again. But she would also be safe from the scrutiny that came with harboring a fugitive. If he stayed, she risked everything. But she had already risked everything by marrying him. That night, they sat by the fire again. Levi carved a piece of wood with a small knife, his hands steady and precise. June mended a torn seam in her sleeve. The domesticity of it felt strange and comforting at once. How long were you a school teacher? Levi asked. 3 years, June said. I taught in Silver Bend until last spring. Why did you leave? June hesitated. The lie was easier than the truth, but something in Levi's quiet attention made her want to offer something real. There was a situation. I was dismissed. The details do not matter, but I lost my position and my reputation. This ranch is my chance to start over. Levy nodded slowly. People are quick to judge and slow to listen. Yes, June said. Exactly. He set down the wood and looked at her. I will not ask you what happened. But I will say this. Whatever they accused you of, I do not believe you are the kind of person who would do something dishonorable without a good reason. June's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him about the stolen papers, about the school board member who had lied, about the fear that had driven her to take the only proof she had. But the words stuck. Instead, she said, "Thank you." The days fell into a rhythm. Levi worked on repairs. June organized the house and planned for spring planting. They cooked simple meals and ate together. They talked in short exchanges that grew gradually longer. June learned that Levi had grown up in Texas, that he had lost his parents young, that he had drifted through ranch work because he had nowhere else to go. Levi learned that June had taught literature and arithmetic, that she loved reading but had few books left, that her father had been a minister who valued obedience over understanding. On the fourth day, a rider came with a telegram. Harlan had wired Hackett. Hackett had not responded. The warrant was still active, but no one was coming to enforce it yet. Levi read the message and folded it carefully. "We wait," he said. June nodded. "We wait." But waiting was not passive. Every morning June woke with the fear that a lawman would arrive. Every evening Levi checked the horizon for riders. The tension wore on them both, but it also drew them closer. They were two people trapped in the same current, and holding on to each other was the only way to keep from being swept under. On the sixth night, June could not sleep. She lay in the dark and listened to the wind and the distant howl of a coyote. She thought about the stolen papers in her trunk and the risk she had taken by marrying a wanted man. She thought about the way Levi looked at her sometimes, with a quiet intensity that made her feel seen in a way she had not been in years. She got up and walked into the front room. Levi was sitting by the fire, awake, a blanket over his shoulders. He glanced up as she entered. "Could not sleep," June said. "Neither could I." She sat in the other chair. The fire popped and sent sparks up the chimney. June pulled her shawl tighter. "I need to tell you something." Levi waited. June took a breath. "When I was dismissed from my teaching position, it was because a school board member falsified records to cover his own misconduct. He made it look like I had behaved improperly with a student's parent. It was a lie. I had documents that proved it. The county office kept copies of employment records and correspondence. I went there, and I took the papers that showed the truth. I stole them. That is my crime. If anyone finds out, I will be charged with theft." Levi's expression did not change. "Where are the papers now?" "In my trunk." "Hidden. Does anyone know you took them?" "No. But if anyone looks for them and traces them here, I will not be able to explain it." Levi leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You took proof of your innocence, because no one would believe you otherwise." "Yes, that is not dishonorable. That is survival." June felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. "The law will not see it that way." "The law does not always see things clearly," Levi said. "I know that better than most. But I will say this. If you need those papers to protect yourself, keep them. If you need to destroy them to stay safe, do it. Either way, I will not judge you, and I will not tell anyone. June looked at him and saw no pity, no condemnation, only a steady acceptance that made her chest ache. Thank you. Levi reached across the space between them and rested his hand on hers for a brief moment. We are both carrying weight we did not ask for. We do not have to carry it alone. June nodded. She did not trust herself to speak. She went back to bed, and this time she slept. The next morning, Levi saddled his horse and told June he was riding to the nearest neighbor to ask about buying cattle. June watched him go and felt the absence of him like a missing piece of the landscape. She spent the day cleaning and sorting. By mid-afternoon, she was restless. She walked out to the windmill and checked the water level. The sky was clear and cold, the air sharp enough to sting her lungs. She was walking back to the house when she saw riders again. 3 this time, coming fast from the south. June's pulse kicked. She ran to the porch and grabbed the rifle Levi had left inside. She did not know if she could shoot it, but holding it made her feel less helpless. The riders pulled up hard in the yard. The lead man was older, heavy-set, with a thick mustache and a cattleman's hat. The 2 men with him were younger, hard-faced, and watchful. The lead man dismounted. "You June Granger?" "Yes," June said. She kept the rifle angled down, but visible. "I am Hackett. I own the range south of here. Your husband worked for me until he stole 30 head of cattle and ran." "Where is he?" June's mind raced. Levi was gone, and she had no way to warn him. "My husband is not a thief. The warrant is false, and you know it." Hackett's smile was cold. "I know he was one of 3 men with access, and the only one who ran. That is guilt enough for me." "Now where is he?" "He rode out this morning. I do not know when he will return." Hackett looked at the house, at the barn, at the empty yard. "Then I will wait." June's grip tightened on the rifle. "You are not welcome here." "I do not need your welcome," Hackett said. "I have a warrant and a right to collect." One of the younger men moved toward the house. June stepped in front of the door. "Do not." Hackett laughed. "You think you can stop me, girl?" "I think I can make it more trouble than it is worth," June said. The men spread out. June's heart hammered, but she did not move. She had faced down men who thought they had power over her before. She would not back down now. The standoff held for a long, tense moment. Then hoofbeats sounded again. June turned and saw Levi riding in fast, his face hard. He dismounted in one smooth motion and walked straight toward Hackett. "You came onto my wife's land without invitation," Levi said. "That is trespassing." "You are a thief," Hackett said. "I do not need an invitation to collect on a warrant." Levi stopped 3 feet from Hackett. "You issued that warrant before you had proof." "I did not take your cattle. If you had looked harder, you would have found that out." Hackett's face darkened. "You ran. That is proof enough. I left because I knew you would blame me whether I stayed or not. You needed someone to take the fall, and I was the easiest target. But I am not taking the blame for your incompetence." Hackett stepped forward, his hand moving toward his belt. Levi did not flinch. June raised the rifle. "Stop." Hackett froze. He looked at June, at the rifle, at Levi. Then he laughed, but the sound was hollow. You are protecting a thief. I am protecting my husband, June said. And you are leaving. Now. Hackett's jaw worked. He glared at Levi. This is not over. Yes, it is, Levi said. Because you are going to go back to your range and find out who really took those cattle. And when you do, you are going to drop the warrant and leave us alone. Hackett spat into the dirt. He swung back into his saddle. His men followed. They rode out hard, kicking up dust. June lowered the rifle and let out a shaking breath. Levi turned to her. Are you all right? Yes. June set the rifle against the porch rail. Are you? I am now. They stood in the cold yard and looked at each other. Something had shifted. They were no longer strangers bound by convenience. They were partners who had stood together in the face of real danger. Levi stepped closer. You did not have to do that. Yes, I did, June said. Why? Because you are my husband. And because I do not let people take what is mine. Levi's mouth curved in a slow smile. That is the first time you have called me your husband, like you meant it. June felt her face warm. Maybe I do mean it. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of coming snow. Levi reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch careful. June's breath caught. For a moment they stood there, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Close enough that one more step would close the space entirely. Then Levi stepped back. We should go inside. That storm is going to hit soon. June nodded. They went inside together. The fire was low. Levi built it up while June made coffee. They sat at the table and did not speak, but the silence was different now. It was the silence of two people who had found something worth protecting. The storm hit that night, worse than the first. Snow fell thick and fast, piling against the walls and covering the windows. The wind screamed. June and Levi moved through the small house like a practice team, banking the fire, securing the shutters, checking supplies. By midnight, the world outside was white chaos. They sat by the fire, wrapped in blankets. June felt the warmth of the flames and the solid presence of Levi beside her, and realized she was not afraid. For the first time in months, she felt something close to safe. Levi turned to her. If Hackett comes back, I will leave. I will not let him use me to hurt you. June shook her head. If Hackett comes back, we face him together. I am not letting you run. He studied her face. You could still walk away from this. You could tell Harlan I lied to you, that you did not know about the warrant. You could keep the ranch and your reputation and let me take the consequences. I could, June said. But I will not, because I chose you, and I do not walk away from my choices. Levi reached for her hand. His fingers were warm and calloused. June laced her fingers through his and felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. I did not expect this, Levi said quietly. I thought this was a bargain. A piece of paper, a way to survive. I did not think I would care about you. June swallowed hard. I did not think I would care about you either. Levi leaned closer. His eyes searched hers. If I kiss you, is that breaking the rules we set? June's pulse kicked. We did not set rules about that. No, Levi said. We did not. He closed the distance. His lips brushed hers, tentative and careful. June leaned into the kiss and felt the world narrow to the warmth of his mouth and the solid strength of his hand in hers. The kiss deepened, slow and deliberate, and when they finally pulled apart, June felt like something inside her had unlocked. They sat together until the fire burned low. Then Levi stood and added more wood. He looked at June and said, "I should let you sleep. Or you could stay," June said. The words came out before she could second-guess them. "The bed is narrow, but we can manage. I do not want to be alone tonight." Levi's expression softened. "All right." They went into the bedroom. June lay down first, still fully dressed. Levi lay beside her, careful to leave space. But June turned toward him and rested her head on his shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her and held her close. The storm howled outside, but inside the small room, June felt warm and anchored, and more at peace than she had in years. She woke to pale light and silence. The storm had passed. Levi was still beside her, awake, watching her face with a quiet intensity. "Morning," he said. "Morning," June said. They lay there for a moment longer, neither wanting to move. Then a sharp knock on the front door shattered the stillness. June's heart lurched. Levi was on his feet instantly, crossing to the window. He looked out, and his jaw tightened. Harlan and two others. June scrambled out of bed. She smoothed her dress and pinned her hair. Levi walked to the door and opened it. Harlan stood on the porch, flanked by two men June did not recognize. "Deputy," Levi said. Harlan's face was grim. "I need you to come with me, Granger." "On what grounds?" June said, stepping beside Levi. "Hackett wired the county. He is pushing for an arrest. The judge signed the order this morning. I have no choice." Levi's expression went flat. "The cattle still have not turned up." "No," Harlan said. "But the judge ruled there is enough evidence for a trial. You will get your chance to prove your innocence in court." June stepped forward. "That is not justice. That is a cattleman with influence using the law to settle a grudge." "Maybe," Harlan said. "But it is still the law." Levi looked at June. His eyes held a message she understood instantly. "Do not fight this. Let me go. Protect yourself." But June had spent her life watching people she loved bend under the weight of unjust authority. She had stolen papers to fight back against lies. She had married a stranger to claim her independence. She was not going to stand silent now. "I have proof that the warrant is false," June said. Harlan frowned. "What proof?" June turned and went to her trunk. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was clear. She opened the trunk and pulled out the hidden papers. "These are teaching certificates and employment records from Silver Bend. They prove that a man in power falsified documents to destroy my reputation. I took them because they were the only proof I had. I know that makes me a thief. But if one man can lie and destroy a life without consequence, and another man can be arrested on a cattleman's word without proof, then the law is not protecting anyone. It is only protecting the people with money and influence." She held out the papers. Harlan took them and read slowly. His expression shifted. "What does this have to do with Granger?" he asked. "It proves that powerful men lie," June said, "and that people without power have to fight for their own justice. Levi did not take those cattle. Hackett accused him because Levi had no family, no ties, no one to defend him. I will not let that happen. If you arrest him, you arrest me too, because I am guilty of theft. And if the law is going to punish someone, it should punish us both equally. Harlan looked at Levi. Is this true? Levi met his eyes. I did not take Hackett's cattle. But I am not going to let my wife go to jail to protect me. If you want to arrest someone, arrest me. Leave her out of this. June grabbed Levi's hand. No. We stand together, or not at all. Harlan rubbed his face. He looked tired and frustrated. This is a mess. Yes, June said. But it is a mess you can stop. Go back to Hackett and tell him you need more proof. Give Levi time to prove his innocence. If you arrest him now, you are locking up an innocent man, and you know it. Harlan was silent for a long moment. Then he folded the papers and handed them back to June. I will hold off for 1 week. But if Hackett finds more evidence, or if you run, I will come back with a full warrant, and I will not be gentle. Understood. Understood, Levi said. Harlan turned and walked out. His men followed. The door closed. June let out a breath she had been holding for what felt like hours. Levi turned to her. You should not have done that. You put yourself at risk. I put us both at risk when I married you, June said. I am not going to stop fighting now. Levi pulled her into his arms. She felt the solid beat of his heart and the warmth of his breath against her hair. Thank you, he said quietly. We have 1 week, June said. What do we do? Levi pulled back and looked at her. We find the truth. They saddled the horses and rode south toward Hackett's range. The air was cold and clear, the snow bright under the late morning sun. June had never ridden this far from the ranch, but Levi knew the way. They followed a narrow trail through scrub and rock, climbing into rough country. By midday, they reached the edge of Hackett's land. Levi dismounted and scanned the ground. June watched him move with the practiced eye of someone who had spent years reading tracks and signs. What are you looking for? June asked. Proof that someone else moved those cattle. Levi walked slowly, eyes on the snow. There. He pointed. Fresh tracks. Horse and cattle. Leading east, not south. June dismounted and joined him. Can you follow them? I can try. They followed the tracks for 2 hours, moving deeper into wild country. The trail led to a narrow canyon choked with brush. Levi dismounted again and walked ahead on foot, moving carefully. June followed, her hand on the reins, her pulse steady but alert. They found the cattle in a box canyon half a mile in. 30 head, branded with Hackett's mark, penned behind a makeshift fence. And standing beside the fence was a young man June had never seen, lean and nervous, holding a branding iron. Levi stopped. June stopped beside him. The young man looked up, and his face went white. You, the young man said. Levi's voice was cold. You are the one who took Hackett's cattle, and you let me take the blame. The young man dropped the iron and bolted. Levi ran after him. June tied the horses and followed. The chase was short and brutal. Levi caught the young man and pinned him against a rock. Talk. The young man gasped for air. Hackett owed me wages. He would not pay. I took the cattle to sell them. I thought he would blame you or one of the others. I did not think you would run. You made me a fugitive, Levi said. You destroyed my name. I am sorry. The young man's voice broke. I will confess. I will tell Hackett the truth. Just do not kill me. Levi let him go. June stepped forward. You are going back to Eagle Creek, and you are telling Deputy Harlan everything. Right now. The young man nodded frantically. Yes. I will. I swear. Levi hauled the young man to his feet. We're all going. Together. They rode back to Eagle Creek with the young man between them. The sun was setting by the time they reached town. Harlan was in his office. Levi pushed the young man inside. This is your thief. He stole Hackett's cattle and hid them in a canyon. He just confessed. Harlan looked at the young man. Is this true? The young man hung his head. Yes. Harlan's expression hardened. Sit down. You are not leaving until I have a full statement. Levi turned to June. Let us go home. They rode back to the ranch in the dark. The stars were out, and the air was bitter cold, but June felt lighter than she had in weeks. The warrant would be dropped. Levi's name would be cleared. They had fought for the truth, and won. They unsaddled the horses and went inside. June lit the lantern and hung her coat. Levi built up the fire. They stood in the warm room and looked at each other. It is over, June said. Yes, Levi said. But I do not want to leave. June's heart kicked. You do not have to. Levi crossed the room and cupped her face in his hands. I came here because I needed an escape. I found something I did not know I was looking for. I found you. June smiled. I married you to claim a ranch. I did not expect to claim a husband I actually wanted to keep. Levi kissed her, slow and deep, and June wrapped her arms around him and held on. The fire crackled. The wind whispered outside. The world was cold and hard, but inside this small house, June felt warm and safe and more alive than she had ever been. When they finally pulled apart, Levi said, So what do we do now? We live, June said. We fix up the ranch. We buy cattle in the spring. We build something that is ours. Together, Levi said. Together, June agreed. Levi grinned. I have never built anything that lasted. I would like to try. June took his hand and led him toward the bedroom. Then, let us start now. They lay together in the narrow bed, wrapped in blankets in each other, and June felt the weight of the last months lift. She had stolen papers and married a stranger, and risked everything for a chance at independence. She had found something better than safety. She had found partnership, trust, and a love she had not known she needed. The morning came cold and bright. June woke to Levi's arm around her, and the quiet certainty that this was where she belonged. They rose and made coffee and planned the spring. Levi would rebuild the stock pen. June would plant a garden. They would hire help when they could afford it. They would make Juniper Ranch a place worth staying. A week later, Harlan rode out with a signed letter from the judge. The warrant was dropped. Hackett had accepted the young man's confession, and the stolen cattle had been returned. Levi was a free man. Harlan handed Levi the letter. You are clear. No charges. I am sorry it took this long. Levi nodded. Thank you. Harlan looked at June. And you, ma'am. Those papers you showed me. I did not report them. But you should burn them or hide them better. If someone else finds out, I will not be able to protect you. June met his eyes. I understand. Thank you. Harlan tipped his hat and rode off. June and Levi stood on the porch and watched him go. It is really over, June said. Yes, Levi said. It is. June turned to him. So what does a free man do with his life? Levi smiled. He stays with his wife and builds a ranch. If she will have him. She will, June said. She definitely will. Levi pulled her close and kissed her under the cold, bright sky. June kissed him back and felt the future unfold before them, uncertain, but theirs. They had both come to Juniper Ranch running from something. They had found something worth running toward instead. And that, June thought, was the best kind of beginning.